Right now I'm here with the new president and CEO of the MetroWest Chamber of Commerce, Paul Joseph. Paul, welcome.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Paul is from the Natick area and is very familiar with the region, and he's hit the ground running as our new Chamber of Commerce president, and very, very glad to have him on board. Paul, thanks for being here with us. You know, I've been asking the other people that I've interviewed tonight, why is it important to the MetroWest Chamber to be involved with charitable endeavors like the United Way?
Well, I think the simplest answer is probably the most obvious, that as a chamber, we're a community of businesses and as a network of individuals that basically live, work, and employ in this region. As somebody who's been active in my volunteer time serving different organizations, and the food security issue being chief among them, I think it's important for our local employers to give back to the very region where, again, given, but for an individual's specific circumstances, whether it's a medical issue, an employment issue, things like that, many more of us than I think most people realize are that close to that edge of food insecurity. So I think it's very important as a resource that, not only do we patronize businesses in our local region, but these are also the institutions that provide the incomes that hopefully sustain us in the quality of life we enjoy in Metro West.
Mm-hmm. I see what you're saying. When we started the Pearl Street Cupboard and Cafe 4 years ago, we never envisioned 4,000 Framingham families being in our database that actually were eligible for assistance for food and had been means tested. And I was talking to Chief Ferguson tonight about when you drive through Framingham, you really wouldn't think that there is such a huge gap of need. Isn't it incredible though that in a place like Framingham, because we have so many folks that are underemployed rather than just the chronically in need, which we're always going to have to help, but the underemployed really throws a new wrinkle into the whole game. So many of the folks that we're seeing now are these underemployed folks, and they're directly connected to commerce because it's the jobs that we're missing. They're working every day, but they're just not able to make ends meet because the jobs that they used to have, the manufacturing jobs, are gone. Can you speak to that a little bit as the business leader of the community?
Absolutely. I think one of the things we're striving towards is attracting employers that can provide livable wage types of jobs. I think one of the deceptive numbers out there is we actually have, it's challenging for some of the retailers and some of the local businesses to hire. And yet the jobs that they are able to provide do not necessarily sustain a family in the Metro West area. The cost of housing, the cost of transportation, education is still so very high that I think you see a lot of people needing multiple jobs, obviously multiple earner families. So when you're in a situation where somebody might be working very hard, but it's very difficult to make those choices sometimes because the income barely covers the rent and barely covers the basic costs of living. Food insecurity is one of those challenges I think it's really unseen by a lot of our neighbors, but for the pride factor, I think people do tend to hide it. I think families do take advantage of the public school system and their ability to at least feed and nourish their children where they can. But I do think it's incumbent on us as community leaders, and as I was a former selectman in Natick, I think as in governance as well, as citizen volunteers that try to serve the community, recognize the fact that sometimes I think the system, as much as we have a lot to celebrate in the Metro West region, we are somewhat of an embarrassment of riches in one dimension. Mm-hmm. In the other dimension that we don't see, the underseen, the underemployed, and those types of challenges I think are very great.
You're right. It's kind of a paradoxical situation because you really don't see it because you don't see the urban blight that you might see driving through another area. Yet there is such significant need. You told us a little bit about why the Metro West Chamber of Commerce thinks it's important to be involved with nonprofits to help people in the community. What makes Paul Joseph tick?
I think it's all of the above. I love business. I think I've got 2 degrees in marketing. I've been self-employed a couple of times, and I've really thrown myself into this role. I think what's important from my personal background is the amount of time I've spent as a volunteer over the past 7 years. I started quietly in politics in Natick, again, starting on town meeting and trying to get involved locally. But I've also run marathons. I ran for the Pine Street Inn. I've run for the Natick Service Council. And trying to contribute my time as much as possible. In this new role, I'm very privileged to represent an organization that has a 120-year history in the region, and I hope to use this as a platform to bring awareness and hopefully engagement within the business community and really connect them to the communities that they serve. I think the concept of a chamber has grown into more of one without walls and one more about building connections.
Well, it's pretty obvious to me that you were a good choice, and I wish you all the success in the world. If there were one thing that you could wish or hope for the people who we serve for the next year, what would you hope would be the wish for their 2016?
I think the goal is to bring everyone to a sustainable level where they can continue to thrive in the MetroWest region. I think a lot of times people have a hard time asking for help, and then once they get into the process where they can achieve that help, frankly, the system historically has worked against them. So to stay persistent, to access the resources that are available to them through the United Way and other organizations, and continue to believe in the fact that community does come together and tries to solve these problems. It's a systemic process, and it's very hard sometimes to probably go through the process when you have to make choices. And hoping events like this telethon and programs that we put on to build awareness will bring people together to hopefully give them further hope that they can actually both pay their bills and feed their families.
Well, thank you very much for those thoughts, and thanks for being with us, Paul. We appreciate it.